The Narc as Predatory Relationship Thief, Narcissist Weasel Syndrome. Up to this point I have dealt with the victims of narc abuse that were in an actual relationship with that narcissist. There is a whole group of narc victims that are the indirect victims of a narcissist. These are the people who have a relationship and have their partner in essence stolen by a narcissist. The narc is an interloper weasel in this scenario, and the victim may never have actual contact with the narc until the relationship is stolen. But some victims do get to have contact with the low-life narc, and the attitude of the narc in these situations is quite stunning. This type of narcissist is the lowest of the low. He far outstrips the average covert narcissist who at least knows their victim and has presumably at least given something of themselves to the victim before the pain they cause. The predatory narc is a different animal altogether. They are most definitely a weasel, but that is probably being unfair to actual weasels, who simply are animals doing what their instincts dictate. The human narc as weasel is doing what his vile lusts dictate, but you could never consider weasel-like behavior normal for a human being. So let's give an illustration to explain the predatory narc. The predatory narc is always on the lookout for a fresh relationship, and they are not bound by a sense of honor. If the narc sees a person that they might like as a partner, the fact that that person is married or is a parent makes very little difference to the narc. The narc wants what the narc wants. Morality or what is right is no issue for the narc, because the narc's needs are the only thing that matters or counts to a narcissist. In an effort to expose these beasts, I have broken their vile activity into 10 phases. Phase 1: so the narc sees a target. Again, it doesn't matter if they are married or have children or if they have a good stable relationship, and then begins to size up that person. The predatory covert narc will always appear as a very humble, self-effacing, meek individual to the target. This is part of how the narc gets what he wants, by appearing harmless, and if it aids in entrapping the target, the narc will seem to an extent helpless or in need of help. That help will be more than welcomed when given by the target. That narc will portray themselves as a paragon of virtue, possibly even throwing in some Bible verses and feigning religiosity. There will be a special cocktail of new fake persona custom made for the intended target, which the narc hopes to make a victim. Phase 2: the narc will get to know that target and have that target open up to them, while the narc carefully takes mental notes and refines their fake persona. Phase 3: of course the topic of how things are going with the partner will eventually come up, and the narc will slowly get their foot in the door and make subtle statements to get as much personal information as possible on the target's relationship. Phase 4: the narc, now having a good idea of the target's needs and desires and a pretty good idea of the weaknesses in the target's relationship, begins to refine their fake persona to an even higher level, now beginning to feign all of the attributes that are missing in the target's partner. Phase 5: the narc has now befriended the target and found out both the vulnerabilities of the target, her partner, and the vulnerabilities of the target's relationship, and begins to enable the target to use themselves as a sounding board to voice complaints about their partner. Phase 6: the narc then slowly begins amplifying those faults in the target's partner and the weaknesses in the relationship, and gets the target to begin questioning if their existing relationship is really as good as they thought it was, and in fact the target begins thinking, I have a friend, the predatory weasel narc, that really gets me, and I feel so much more understood when I am around that person. The narc has now created the perfect custom-made persona and planted the idea in the target's mind that they are the target's soulmate. The narc is very watchful and aware when Phase 6 has taken full completion. In fact, he is looking for this. Phase 7: the narc then backs off a little bit and tells the victim that it really isn't any of his business, the target should work it out with her partner. After all, they are married and share children with that person, even if that person isn't perfect. The narc has played the target like a fiddle and just sits back and waits. The target now can't do without the advice and friendship of the noble, virtuous narc, and starts thinking that maybe she needs to be with the narc, not her partner. Phase 8 is the culmination of the weasel's plans, when there begins to be a solid emotional relationship built with the target, and the target's loyalties are slowly but surely, methodically, completely removed from the target's partner over to the narc. The narc is careful to do this very subtly. Phase 9 is when the narc has now got a physical and deep emotional relationship with the target and is well on the way to getting the previous partner out of the picture. So let's pause here, and focus on the target's partner, the indirect victim of the narc. The target's partner may or may not be a perfect person, and as with all people there is always room for improvement, but that partner has made a firm, lifetime commitment to the target. The target, who is gradually having her loyalty stolen by the narc weasel, gradually becomes more distant and unavailable emotionally to her pre-existing partner, and that partner, if they love the target, is aware of what is going on and tries to get to the bottom of things and see what is wrong, but really doesn't suspect any danger to the relationship. The target is a sensitive person, and her pre-existing partner makes his own notes and endeavors to repair what is wrong with the relationship slowly and carefully. The pre-existing partner has absolutely no clue that there is a wolf, actually weasel, at the door of their relationship. So here is the sad thing: because the target's partner trusts the target implicitly, he is never even aware of the extent of the problem in the relationship until the target acts in such a bizarre manner that he gets suspicious. Of course, at this point the target has already switched her loyalty over to the predatory weasel narc and is unreachable by the pre-existing partner. The point where the target's partner is now angry and agitated and totally confused as to what is going on is where we will get back to the predatory narc weasel. This acting up of the pre-existing partner is what the predatory narc weasel has waited for, and the narc now institutes phase 10, formally taking the relationship away from the pre-existing partner. Of course, now the pre-existing partner is introduced to the narc, a person he never suspected existed. The narc weasel will give an appearance of being a knight in shining armor, saving the poor target from that crazy and angry pre-existing partner. After all, the target now has a relationship with the narc. The narc never got angry at her. The narc was patient and supportive, not like that crazy unstable previous partner of hers. Now, you might think that the narc weasel would have a bit of pause. After all, he just won his trophy and stole a relationship right from under the nose of the unwitting pre-existing partner. Does the narc feel remorse, guilt, or shame for his actions? Well, he's a narc, we know the answer: of course not. But here is where things go from the narc being a bad person to being a hideous creature literally dripping wet with raw sewage. The pre-existing partner is of course now going to try to fight for the relationship, so what does the narc weasel do? The narc weasel starts gloating to the pre-existing now ex-partner about having taken away the target, and sadly, the target is now joining in with that narc weasel. The narc weasel is a powerful, real man, not like the weak pre-existing partner. Then the narc weasel decides to take over defense of the target and tells the target to go no contact with her ex-partner. No communication whatsoever. Let's go back to the ex-partner of the target. Well, he was blindsided and clueless, but he begins to look back on the past few months and reinterprets a lot of the statements and actions of his ex-partner, the target of the narc weasel, and starts realizing the effects that the narc weasel had on destabilizing the relationship. Unfortunately, for him, it is too late. His partner is firmly in the arms of the narc weasel predator. Now here is where the story gets interesting. The narc weasel always overestimates himself and simply believes that the previous partner of the target will sit still and take his abuse. So the narc starts making death threats against the previous partner on Instagram. Of course they are just benign posts, not just general statements, sure. Well, unfortunately for the weasel, he grossly underestimated the target's previous partner. That ex-partner gave the narc plenty of warnings to back off and shut up. The narc weasel won his prize, so stop with the gloating. Of course the weasel wouldn't stop, so it was time for him to come face to face with the previous partner of the narc. Meet man to man. The narc's partner would come unarmed and only wanting to talk, but the narc weasel would have to back up all of his threats. So what ended up happening? Well, the ex-partner first calls the narc weasel and has a little talk with him. The narc weasel then makes the threat that I am going to find you. Well, unfortunately for the weasel, he bit off more than he could chew. The ex-partner said words to the effect, maybe I am going to find you first. Well, the weasel spoke a few expletives and hung up. Well, about 4 hours later, the narc's ex-partner gets a call from the police informing him he shouldn't go anywhere near the weasel or call the weasel again. Well, that call was the greatest victory for the person who had just had his woman stolen from him and then had vicious threats made by the weasel. That weasel backed down and showed himself to be the true coward that he was. That was the turning point for the ex-partner of the target. By the way, the target was also narcissistic and became a full-blown narc under the weasel's tutelage. That was the day the ex-partner began to get himself back, a shred of his dignity, a piece of himself. The ex-partner would never be afraid of anything a human could do to him again. There was only a fear of God. Please be aware that this story is partly fictional, since the ex-partner will never really know what went on between the narc weasel and his ex-partner. The part of how a narc seduces a victim was witnessed firsthand, observing a narc plying his trade on a co-worker, as well as other actual accounts of the activities of slimy narcs, so it was incorporated to fill in the part the ex-partner will never know about. Oh yes, my narc partner has a very interesting past, and that information came to me miraculously and by chance. So I now know much about her, but I can't verify those things. I can only speak of what I know, and that I will do in such a way never to hurt or damage my narc ex-partner. Despite everything, I still care, and it is my sincerest hope that she one day views these videos and sees herself for who she is and what she is doing to those around her. Thank you for watching. Your comments are welcomed. Peace be with you.